All right, so we said that even to do things at rest, like think, takes hundreds of millions of ATPs. And we're only generating a small amount of ATP from a sugar, from one single molecule of glucose. So there has to be a better way. How do we do that? And so one of the most important other ways is through using fat as a fuel. Okay, so the other main fuel that we have carbohydrates, and the other main fuel that we're going to use really is fat. We're not going to use amino acids as a fuel too dramatically. We're going to use it, but it's always going to stay about the same amount. The ones that really change as we change how much activity we're doing or what we're doing throughout the day are fat and carbohydrate. So let's take a look now at how we're going to generate ATP from fat. So the bottom line up front for this is that when we talked about carbohydrate, so one glucose molecule is going to produce about 30 ATP. So now when we look at one fatty acid, our fatty acids are going to generate lots more ATP. So we're going to generate, say, 35 ATP through one cycle and another 96 through another. But it's going to take a lot more time. So we're going to get a lot more energy out of our fat, but it's going to take us a lot more time. So when time is a restriction, then you can't use fat as much. So fatty acids can be carried into our body through our blood. So there's blood fatty acids that are transported using these proteins like albumin in the blood, and they're delivered to our muscle, or they're transported through these high density, low density lipoprotein molecules. And our fat can be taken up into our muscle as a fatty acid. And this one's palmitate, which is one of the most common fatty acids. And what you can see is it's 3 fatty acids together. It looks like a strip of bacon, but it's supposed to be 3 fatty acids together. And it's together with a molecule called glycerol, which is where you get a triglyceride. So tri, meaning 3, glyceride, meaning it's a glycerol molecule. So a triglyceride is a glycerol and 3 fatty acids. And when the 3 fatty acids are the most common fatty acids in your body, that's going to be 3 palmitate molecules. And palmitate, where we talked about a glucose, was 6 carbons in size. A palmitate is 18 carbons in size. So it's already 3 times as big. And so when we look at these molecules, it's 3 times as big. Remember, when we're breaking down glucose, we go to pyruvate, and then we turn that, which is a 3-carbon molecule. We then change that as we transport pyruvate into the mitochondria. It becomes acetyl-CoA, which is a 2-carbon molecule. And then that's going to go through the TCA cycle and generate, with oxygen, generate more ATP. Here what we're going to do is with fatty acids, they can, again, come from our blood or come from intramuscular stored fatty acid within the muscle. You get these fatty acids, you again have to transport them into the mitochondria, and all of fat breakdown happens in the mitochondria. So that's the first step, is you already have to get it into the mitochondria. So that's taking longer than that glycolysis, which we could do quickly. And that also means you have to be close enough to a mitochondria so that you can get the fat in there. So you get this fat into the mitochondria, and it would be transported not as the triglyceride like it is shown here, but as a single fatty acid. And that fatty acid would be together with this CoA molecule. And then what you do is you have to go through this first phase. And this first phase is called beta oxidation. And all it is you're going to take this fat, this 18 carbon fat, and each time you go through this cycle, you'll cut off 2 carbons that are acetyl-CoA. Then you'll have a 16 carbon fat, and you'll go through again, snip, acetyl-CoA. Snip, acetyl-CoA. 12 carbon, and it's going to go through that until you're down to 2 carbons, and that last 2 carbons, or 4 carbons I should say, and when you split the last one, you've got 2 acetyl-CoA molecules. All right? In the process of beta oxidation, just breaking that carbon 18 down, you're generating 35 ATP molecules. So you're already generating a fairly large amount of ATP there. But then you've got the acetyl-CoA, and just like the acetyl-CoA that came in from pyruvate, now that goes through the TCA cycle. But here, because we broke down, instead of breaking down 6 carbons, which cost us, if we go back, 6 oxygens, now we're breaking down many more carbon bonds. So now from that 6 carbons that we broke down from sugar, now we've got in this triglyceride, we're going to have 18, 18, 18. So 18, 30. So in this example, you're going to break down, you're not going to get fully all of the acetyl-CoA, but you'll get 48 acetyl-CoAs essentially coming through there. You're going to need 48 oxygens, and you're going to produce a whole lot of ATP and a whole lot of carbon dioxide. So again, this is going to take longer than getting carbohydrate to produce ATP, because carbohydrate can produce it really quickly through glycolysis, or it just goes through the TCA cycle. Here we have to go through cycle 1, beta oxidation, around and around and around and around. Cycle 2, TCA cycle, around and around. As a result, we're going to need more oxygen to break down fat, and it's going to take longer. So when our body is deciding which fuel to use, what you can see is we've got this interesting thing. Fats come in, we go through beta oxidation, they produce acetyl-CoA. Glucose comes in, goes through glycolysis, produce pyruvate, and it comes into the mitochondria as acetyl-CoA. So now we've got this traffic jam. So it's just like if we're coming back from Sacramento and you've got the 5 coming in, or sorry, you're about to go to the bypass and you've got the 80 coming in, and you've got the 80 that goes around Sacramento, and you get into this area where you've got a 3-lane highway here and a 3-lane highway here, and now you're going to come together to form a 2-lane highway. Somebody wasn't really thinking when they did that, or a 3-lane highway either way. Now what you've got is you've got this traffic jam. So you can either have lots coming in from sugar, you can have lots coming in from fat, or you can do a mixture. But once you get to this acetyl-CoA, if there's a lot more fat being broken down, you're going to have more fat from here, and you're going to get more of the cars coming from that direction in to the TCA cycle. If you have a lot more sugar, now you're going to push more sugar in here. Now you're going to have a lot more cars coming from there. So now you're going to choose to do the sugar to drive the TCA. But what you've got is you've got this narrowing where you're making a choice now between fat or sugar, and that is going to then feed back, because if now you have a lot of acetyl-CoA, there's a message that goes back, hey, we've got a lot of acetyl-CoA, let's stop breaking down glucose, or let's stop breaking down fatty acids. And so what you're doing is you're making a choice. It's really an either or choice in muscle, because you can get certain percentages, but as you increase the amount of fats that you have, you're going to decrease how much glucose you use to drive your muscle. As you decrease the amount of fatty acids that are around, you'll increase the use of glucose. The other thing that is making this decision is how quickly you need to make energy. So if you need to make energy really quickly, you're going to use more glucose as a fuel because you can do that faster. So when we're choosing our fuels, it's how intense your exercise is, because the higher your exercise intensity, the faster you're breaking down ATP. How much stress you have, because stress hormones change how much fat and sugars there are in your muscle. What's your diet and exercise history? If you are on a ketogenic diet where you eat 80 to 90% fat, or 80% fat and 20% protein, and you don't take in any carbohydrate, you're going to have a lot of fat, very little carbohydrate. You're going to use more fat as a fuel. If you have a standard, elite athlete diet of about 55% carbohydrate, then you're going to have more sugars, and you're going to use those sugars to produce more energy. If you have a lot of mitochondria, now you can choose more fat. All of those different things are going to play into which fuel is used. And other things like blood flow and glycogen stores are going to be important in this as well, because if I have been on a ketogenic diet for only a short period of time, one of the things that happens with a ketogenic diet is you break down all of your sugars, your glycogen stores, so that you don't have to have as many carbohydrates there. Initially, you're going to use those carbohydrates, and you're going to lose glycogen, and that's one of the reasons why on a ketogenic diet you lose weight really quickly, at least in the first little bit, because the first 4 or 5 pounds that you're losing is because you've gotten rid of the water associated with your glycogen. All right, so all of these things are going to go into what determines which fuel is used. All right, so there's a lot on the summary slide here. What I would tell you to do is, instead of me going through and doing this point by point, just pause the video here, take a look through the summary. I don't need to read this, you can read this. So, and with that, that's the end of this one on what we're using as fuels to power our body.